Welcome to the Kolbecast, episode 295. Thank you for joining us. Today, Bonnie and I are joined by Kolbe Alumna and Holy Heroes brand manager, Clara Davidson. Clara talks to us about the advantages that she gained by her Kolbe homeschooling experience, and especially by reading original texts. We also discuss her experiences in producing material through Holy Heroes as a child, working in a family business, and experiencing Holy Heroes now as a parent. Of course, we also take this opportunity to find out what wonderful new things are happening over at Holy Heroes. We hope that you'll enjoy the show.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie, Kolbe homeschooling mom of 4 lads and lasses, liturgical musician, popcorn, and podcast fanatic.
And this is Stephen, homeschooling father of 5 and director of development for Kolbe Academy.
Hi, Stephen. How are you?
Doing very well. It's a busy time of year here as we're recording today.
It definitely is. Yep. We are recording this during Advent. Lots going on and lots of beautiful feast days that we're enjoying. Our guest today might sound very familiar to many of our listeners, and that's for good reason. Clara Davidson is the brand manager for Holy Heroes and a significant contributor to the company's many audio and video offerings, including Glory Stories, the Marian Consecration Family Adventure, and the Lenten and Advent Adventures, among many others. She's also a Kolbe alumna. Hi, Clara. Welcome to the Kolbecast.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
It's great to meet you. Our family has grown up with the Glory Stories and have enjoyed many of your offerings. It's really been a gift to our family. We'd love to get to know you a bit. Would you tell us a bit about yourself and your background and so forth?
Oh yeah, of course. It's so funny you talk about glory stories now. I have a 4.5-year-old and we listen to all the glory stories, and we're doing Advent Adventure right now because it's Advent. And it was funny because we've done Advent Adventure watching the daily Jesse Tree videos, which is all my siblings and I when we were little kids. And we did it for about 2 years before my daughter realized. And I think one of the videos was shot in like an area of my parents' house that has not changed. I saw her realize this. She looked and then looked more closely and then just turned and looked at me, realizing in this moment that wait, these are all my aunts and my uncle, and reassessing. So it's been really fun. We have so many people tell us how wonderful glory stories have been for their families, and now I am getting to benefit from it with my kids, and it's been really lovely. And I'm crying listening to these audio stories that I'm in and I've heard so many times, but I think it is just different when you're the parent and getting to experience not just the audio story, but also your kids experiencing it for the first time or the half dozen times they're listening to it. It's really been wonderful now as a parent myself. So highly recommend glory stories now as a parent with my own kids. But yeah, you kind of said a little bit about me. My parents founded Holy Heroes when I was, I think, in very end of middle school. I'm one of 8 kids and we were all homeschooled. We did Kolbe. And so because we were homeschooled and because Holy Heroes was a family company, we were all super involved. Packing orders, creating content, doing customer service, traveling to dozens and dozens of homeschool conferences over the years. And it's been really fun now to be back as an adult in the company. I left after high school, after I graduated from Kolbe, went to college, got married, worked in the world for a minute, and then got to come back to Holy Heroes. And I think I always knew I would be back. But it has been really sweet over the last few years to be here, especially now having kids myself.
Neat. What are some of your standout memories from your time as a Kolbe student?
It's really interesting. I, as well as I'm sure many moms listening to this, I'm a part of Well-Read Mom. And probably once a year, they have kind of what they say is a quote, harder book to read. And I believe last year it was the Aeneid, which I read as part of Kolbe. And it was really interesting because there were a lot of women who were really intimidated, didn't want to read it, felt like they didn't really get it. it was kind of an interesting month in that book club because I just didn't have that experience because I had read it before. And that has kind of been tenfold then in my life when I come back to these books. Maybe they're books that I don't particularly remember impacting me as a high schooler, but they're not intimidating to go back and read now as an adult because you've already passed through them once. And I think that is a huge benefit because if you are just coming in contact with, the great books as an adult, it is a really intimidating prospect to open them up. And I remember something that a lot of the women in the book club experienced. They just didn't know anything about Greek mythology and they just had no experience with this ever in their lives. So it wasn't a necessarily enjoyable experience for them because they were trying to read this perhaps more difficult book, perhaps the first time they've read poetry in a long time, and then also try to like catch up and learn all of this mythology. And I just had a really different experience because it wasn't my first time reading it because of Kolbe.
It brings something to mind when I'm thinking of the students and like, oh, this is really hard stuff we're doing in ninth grade and 10th grade and
Yeah.
whatever. But it is, but it will be hard no matter when you pick it up for the first
Yes.
time. So it's okay when you're a ninth grader and you think, why did we just hear about ships, Greek ships by the river for a chapter in this book? What is going on here? But yeah, always a challenge the first time through.
Yeah, and I think something that I have really realized in the last couple of years because we read so many of the classics of the great books in high school in Kolbe, you just because you read it once, the reason why these books have stood the test of time means that you read them multiple times and you will get more out of them. You'll get something completely different out of them. You'll be in a different stage of life, so different aspects of it will speak to you in a different way. These are books that you get to continue reading over and over again through your life. And I think again, I kind of already said this, but having read them in high school, it does give you that starting point that it's not the first time you come in contact with this style, this story, this plot, these characters. It just helps you so much the next time you come in contact because the goal of educating your children is that it's not going to end at 18 or at 22 if they go on to college. This is going to be a lifelong pursuit. So even if it's something that your child doesn't enjoy or they feel like, well, that was a dumb book to read or I didn't get anything out of it, they actually did. They just don't realize it at this moment. And the hope is that they will revisit this later and maybe it'll be something they really enjoyed. I sort of felt that way about the Divine Comedy. I just really I couldn't even tell you anything I absorbed from it in high school. But when I came back to it a year or two ago, again, it wasn't the first time I had done this. And because I had the ability to read and read critically and also understand that, you're not going to necessarily absorb everything from this read through, but maybe you'll read it again in 5, 6, 7 years. So you don't have that pressure to feel like, well, I don't understand this canto, so I'm done. I'm just going to throw in the towel. So you do get to hopefully instill in your child as a student when they're young, this idea that you are going to continue to come in contact with these books and ideas from these books. And hopefully you'll read them again because that is the goal. These are books to be read over and over and over again throughout their lives.
That's helpful for students who think they have to understand it fully on their first pass. Like I didn't get that and I'm not going to get it or yeah. Well, what other memories do you have of your homeschooling time, of growing up homeschooled?
I had a really great homeschool experience. It was, I think, something now that I look back at a lot. Again, like I said before, I'm one of 8 kids, and 5 of my siblings are in the military. So they are kind of strewn far and wide and don't really have the ability to dictate their schedule or their location. And you really do look back on all that time you had together growing up. And it's a really fond memory to have. We got a lot of time together. All of us doing the same homeschool curriculum gave us a lot of inside jokes, a lot of shared experiences that you can get in other ways, perhaps going to a traditional school. But that time together, I think, is really something you can't replicate. And I am just so grateful for all those years that we had together, because now we usually see each other, over Christmas or Thanksgiving, and then sporadically through the rest of the year. But it requires a lot of travel for us to see each other, a lot of driving or even some flights. That I think is something that I definitely took for granted as a child and now don't anymore as an adult.
That's beautiful. Your parents spoke about this. They visited with us on episode 63, which is one of our most downloaded episodes of the whole Kolbecast history. It's one of our most popular. Neat to hear about the relationships you all forged during that time and that you maintain now. How do you think your homeschool experience influenced your next steps, like college and family life and so forth, and whatever else?
Yeah, I was a double major in English and political science. I don't even remember the study that was done that just showed that homeschoolers overwhelmingly go into the liberal arts. Um, and so I'm no exception to that rule. I went to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, so I'm a Tar Heel. And I think being homeschooled gave me such a leg up compared to a lot of other students, because I didn't feel confined to these kind of um I'm trying to think of a good word for it. I don't know if traditional is the word for it, but kind of like, this is what we do, this is how we learn. When you are not part of that standardized system, you have the ability to think outside the box in ways that just don't occur to someone who has never had that opportunity. I think we hear a lot about how when you go to college, that first semester is really hard because you have to, buy a planner for the first time and like manage yourself and go visit your professors if you don't understand something. That comes very naturally to students who have had to do that for the last several years of their life in homeschooling, where you do have to self-motivate. You do have to keep track of your own curriculum. And, I always thought it was really interesting. I don't know if Kolbe still does this, but everything was grouped by week. It wasn't necessarily by day. So you had to decide how you were going to manage this through your week. And I didn't really think about that as a kid, but that does help set you up for college, where you are going to have to figure out how to manage your time and how to manage these classes and what you're going to get done. And nobody's watching you. You're not in a classroom where a teacher is kind of ensuring that you're staying on task. You have to manage yourself. And I watched a ton of kids. I mean, UNC Chapel Hill, their acceptance rate is like 18%. I mean, no kid walking in there was like a dummy in high school. And you just watched first semester freshman year, even second semester freshman year, kids just getting decimated by this inability to self-motivate, to manage their time, to keep up with things, to like read a syllabus. You actually do that in homeschooling. You do that in Kolbe. You get these big binders with all of your syllabuses for everything for the year. And if you have gone to most traditional schools, the teacher has a syllabus and the big binder. You never see it. And they make sure that you walk through everything you have to walk through each week. So I really realized, I think now homeschooling has become so mainstream, and it just was not that way 10, 20 years ago. And I remember going to college and a lot of people saying like, "Oh, wow, you were homeschooled. Like, how are you doing?" And I was like, I seem to be the only one who's doing okay. Like everyone else is just like, this is like shocking new information to them that you need to manage yourself. And of course, I'm speaking in generalizations. There were plenty of children who went to public and private school who were able to, hit the ground running in college. But I just found that the things that seemed to be tripping people up around me, I just didn't experience that at all. And what I then got to do, because I wasn't kind of caught in this learning curve, I was able to take advantage of so many more opportunities that I felt like my peers weren't doing until like junior and senior year, with like research opportunities and research funding and internships and things that I was able to do even starting freshman and sophomore year. I actually studied abroad first semester sophomore year. And I was the only sophomore on that trip because I was the only freshman who thought to apply first and second semester, because everyone else was still trying to figure out how to read a syllabus. So it does, I do think this is kind of an outdated and going by the wayside idea that homeschooling is just not going to prepare you for college. It's kind of laughable at this point if you look at how the stats have worked out for a lot of homeschool families over the last 10 years. So I am glad that that is being acknowledged, because I had a almost seamless transition to college based on my experience homeschooling.
Love that point. I mean, so you've covered both things. You've covered content, like the content of Kolbe, but also then that experience. And it's something I think when I think about like my public school experience, I tend to think about content mostly, but you've just hit on that point where for a homeschooling student, the discipline is an internal factor. It has to be, if you're going to get anything done. But oftentimes in a public school, the discipline is external. So you're just like, here, you do this next. You need to do this by tomorrow. At this hour, you're going to sit here and you're going to do this. And so, it's got to be I can see how it would be uncomfortable to a certain extent to all of a sudden you just pull off all of those rigid exterior discipline that you've been through, and it's like, well, what do I do now? Somebody used to tell me, make me write in my book that I had to do this tonight so that I could turn it in tomorrow, and yeah, that's so interesting. I don't think about that very very often, but that's definitely true.
Yeah, and especially if you go to, I'm sure there's all different flavors of college, right? I think especially if you go to a large university, which was something I really wanted. I wanted to go to a large school. I mean, you can get lost very quickly. And I think if you go to, my husband went to a small Catholic liberal arts school, and it's more difficult to get lost there because there just aren't as many people to, fit in with a crowd. But even he had a little bit of adjustment. He was not homeschooled. Um, a little bit of an adjustment period, because even at small schools with small class sizes, I mean, professors are not high school teachers and they aren't your parent. And so even in these small class sizes, he still had kind of a transition his first semester, because he didn't know about assignments, and he just was like, it took a second to catch up with this new expectation that I was going to manage myself. And these professors, most professors aren't just gonna not say anything, but they might mention it like on a Wednesday and it's due on Friday. And I guess you could try to write a 15-page research paper in, what is that, 2 days? But it's going to be kind of hard to do.
Yep.
I went to a Thomas Aquinas College, a small Catholic school
Yeah.
myself after public school. And yeah, I remember the first papers. It's like everybody's doing their paper the weekend. Maybe they've done some reading or whatever. But my wife was homeschooled, and so I watched her, and she always had her paper done like the weekend before. And so when I
Yeah,
started
that was me.
spending, yeah, yeah, right. So then you can give it a once over, the before it's due, and then turn it in. That it makes sense. But I actually only started that because I was a last second sort of thing all through public school and for my first papers. But then I saw, wait, while everybody's sitting there stressed out on paper weekend, I can just lounge around and read my books and go at it was I actually had too much fun asking people like, oh, so how's it going? Or you want to go out and take a walk or do something? They said, oh, you're busy writing the paper. Okay, no, I'm done. I'm done with that.
Oh,
A little cruel on my part, I guess, but it was a fun experience.
And what you also get to do, I did this several times. I would submit papers early because, usually they just want you to email it or upload it, whatever. And I would have professors say like, oh, I was reading your paper. I would change this. It's not technically due till tomorrow. So like you can change and re-upload. So that is kind of a little bit of a cheat code. Not all professors will do that, but I mean, I had a very technical professor, and was very like by the books with everything, like citation wise, formatting wise. And it was for a social work class. And I had never done this style of citation. And it was in the style of a graduate level class. So there was really just like one paper due at the end of the semester. So it's kind of a big deal. And I submitted my paper early by a day or two. And she emailed me back and said, like, oh, I'm just going to tell you this and you can re-upload. Like, these citations have errors, don't look correct. And I was able to fix that, because if I hadn't, I mean, she was very like, here's the rubric for grading. And that would have been a big blow. So if you submit things early, every once in a while, that will come back around, versus if you're the student who is at the last minute sending it in. I mean, there's just nothing anybody can do for you.
Similar to going to office hours. You show up and
Yes. Yeah.
demonstrate that you've made that effort. They're happy to work with you a lot of the time. They recognize you putting that forth. Yeah.
And you need that for any recommendations you have. That kind of is another aspect. I mean, maybe I'm showing my cards a little bit about who my personality is, but I really like every semester, I would say, like, I'm going to go to every single professor's office hours that I'm taking a class from. And then I had certain professors that I had taken in previous semesters and previous years that I would like go back and stop by their office and just say hi and talk to them. And that gave me really good recommendation letters for study abroad, for I had funded research when I was in school. I would not have gotten my research funded if I did not have great recommendation letters, because there were certain professors that I kept relationships with just by popping into their office and saying hi. And it's just so funny, like the stereotypes about homeschooling kids not being socialized and not knowing how to do these things. You actually do know how to do these things, because you're with your siblings who are all very, varying ages. A lot of the activities you do, a lot of homeschool groups, co-ops, anything like that, you're interacting with people of a variety of different ages. You're talking to a lot of adults, because there aren't that many adults in traditional school. There's the teachers and that's it. You're not really going to talk to your friends' parents at school, but in a lot of homeschool settings, you are going to do that. So, office hours are like the unsung heroes of you're struggling in a class, but you're going to need a recommendation letter at some point for anything. And I didn't even apply to grad school, so I wasn't even looking for grad school recommendation letters. But if you're applying to grad school, you're going to have some relationships with professors. So that's my pitch for office hours if anyone's about to go to school.
And beautiful relationships going forward the more
yes, I invited some of them to my wedding.
Yeah, you're just pulling out all of the benefits of, I mean, this can happen even if you're not homeschooled. But again, that is a benefit of being, as you said, growing up and speaking with adults and interacting with people in kind of normal situations, compared to, again, my public school experience where they are the teachers and we are the students. I had good relationships with my teachers, but there is a definite, like, they're there, we're over here. And, right. And it's kind of easier to break those barriers when you're homeschooled. It's not us and them. It's just kind of us, But.
Yeah.
Well, I would love for you to tell us your memories of Holy Heroes beginning and early years. And I also want to hear what you're up to now, kind of running the gamut.
So like I said, I have to look up exactly how old I was. I feel like I was 12 or 13 when Holy Heroes was founded. And, I was helping packing the first orders in our garage. I really have always enjoyed working. I find it really fulfilling. And I loved it. I loved packing for conferences. I loved going to conferences. I'm a pretty extroverted person, so I loved chatting with people. We would always have competitions. Whatever siblings went to conferences, we would have sales competitions, see who could make the most sales. That will really help you later in life, because you can talk to anyone about anything, even if you're introverted. And I think I always knew I would come back to Holy Heroes as an adult. Like I said, 5 of the 8 of us are military. So I think they went the exact opposite of entrepreneurship, is like the military. And so that is funny. Like, you can have these family businesses and it really is just a personality who can work for themselves, work for family business. And for other people, that is like such a turn off. They're like, I will work for the government. Like, I can't do this. And then there are other reasons why they join the military. You know, they all feel it's a variety of branches. You know, it all speaks to their personality and who they are and what their goals are for their life. But I think it was widely accepted amongst my siblings that I would be the one who would come back. They'd be like, Mom and Dad will be fine. Holy Heroes will be fine. Like Clara will eventually go back and she can do it then. Um, so it really, I think, was a surprise to no one when I eventually made my way back here. And I would even be in interviews um, for jobs coming out of school. I was very fortunate to walk out of school with a job, but in some of those jobs with my junior year for internships and then my senior year, they would like look at my resume and they would, you know, talk to me. And after they talked to me for a little while, I had several people who said like, so is your plan to go back to your family business? Like, is that, and you could tell they were kind of like, yeah, we're not hiring you at Enterprise if you're going to leave immediately in 2 years to go back. So I may have lost a few jobs because of that. But it was interesting that even people who talked to me in the work sphere and looking at my resume, even with everything else, a lot of stuff just came back to Holy Heroes and getting to live the experience of a family business. So I'm back. I've been back for 5 or 6 years now. Dates are just not my thing this morning, I'm realizing. And I've really loved it. My title is brand manager, but really what that means is I manage all the online programs and I do all the marketing and then interviews like this, which I love. It's been fun to see kind of the content that we created so many years ago and that we grew up with, and then also be able to add to that, add things like the Marian Consecration program, add more glory stories over the years. It's a really, I think, sweet experience coming back to something that is part of your family's legacy and getting to be a part of it now in this new way. And, you know, my daughter will say like, and then when I grow up, I'll work at the same office as grandpa and mom.
Oh.
And so that's cute. I don't know if that's going to be the story of her life, but it is nice that she's getting to see that modeled, because we do see a lot of family businesses where none of the kids come back to work. And that always makes me a little sad as someone who works for a family business. You want to keep it in the family.
Sure. Your memories of the recording times.
Yeah. A lot of the videos that we recorded were just at our house. I had a sister who was really interested in videography, so she did a lot of that. My mom did a lot of it. When we recorded the audio components of glory stories, or just other things for online programs, sometimes it was as informal as we have a lot of relationships with the different producers who have produced our glory stories. And so sometimes it was just at our house or at their house. Sometimes it was in a sound studio. Mark's sound studio in Charlotte, we did a lot with them. And I remember we actually were just talking about this over Thanksgiving. I saw some of my siblings, and one of my sisters was laughing, Anna. She was like, I just remember going to record and Mr. Lambert called me Anna Montana, and we did not watch the Disney Channel growing up. And Anna was like, I was so offended because I was like this 9-year-old girl and he called me Anna Montana. And I was like, I'm not allowed to watch that show. And it was just funny that she had this memory of 9 in a sound studio, and like poor Mr. Lambert was trying to be funny and she was like most offended by that statement. But we had some good times. We have some good pictures of all of us in the sound studio doing different things. I think I was probably about 16 when I got to interview Jake Finkbonner. That interview is at the end of the St. Kateri Glory Story. And Jake was the little boy who was cured of a flesh-eating bacteria, and that through the of then Blessed Kateri. And we got to interview him after that miracle was investigated and approved, and that was the final miracle needed for her canonization. And he was 12 at that point. He had been, I think, 4 or 5 when the accident had happened, and he had been hospitalized and then miraculously cured. And getting to do that interview we were on opposite sides of the country. His family lived in Washington State. We were in North Carolina. So it was a call in a sound studio for both of us on opposite ends. And that was a really impactful interview to do, I think, as a high schooler. For anyone who doesn't know his story, he was miraculously cured, but he was actually in a medically induced coma at the time, and he actually went to heaven and remembers it and came back and then was talking about it with his family afterwards, which kind of led to this investigation of, they knew it was a pretty unexpected miraculous recovery, but then he has this component where he did get to have conversations with God, have conversations with family members who had died. He remembers and can describe a lot of parts of heaven. And you can listen to that whole interview at the end of the St. Kateri Glory Story. But that was a really impactful interview to do as a high schooler. I think I just had a conversation with a friend of mine. She has 6 boys, and she's homeschooling. And we were just talking about kind of the high school years and the teenage years, which do get kind of a tough rap because kids are growing into adulthood, and there are a lot of moments where they do kind of want to make decisions for themselves. And we were talking about, what do you do if you have a teenager who suddenly doesn't want to go to mass or some, things along those lines. And of course, this is everyone talking, no one has teenagers. And I just remember saying, I think what I would do if I had a teenager who was pushing back on this is I really would say, like, okay, whatever it is, the mass, the Eucharist, saints, I don't know, you come to me with an argument and prove that it's wrong, and then great, you don't have to believe this, but I'm really not afraid of you finding anything, because we have this plethora of Eucharistic miracles. We can thank St. Carlo Acutis for cataloging all of this on a website. Like, you prove where the scientific studies that have been done on these hosts that have turned into human heart tissue that all has the same blood type. It's all a man, roughly 33. All of these things, prove to me that the Shroud of Turin investigations that have gone on at very high levels, a lot of them were conducted by U.S. Air Force scientists. You need to prove to me that these were wrong. And if you can't, then this is true. And you don't get to make an emotional decision where you decide, well, I just don't want to. No. You got to back that up with something. And I'm really not worried about what you're going to find, because the lovely thing about the Catholic Church is that it's true. And getting to do that interview with Jake as a high schooler, that is pretty impactful. It's impactful to hear it, but it is impactful to talk to someone who's had that experience of going to heaven, that this is a real place. And, do you not want to end up there at the end of your life? Like, that would be just embarrassing at the end of the day, to know about this and then not get there.
You're right. We are just so fortunate, even beyond those remarkable things that you're just with our faith, because I have 5 kids. My oldest is 21 and down to 11. But so we're in a lot of those, but there aren't those sorts of conversations, because all along there have been the delving into the explanation is like, we know we can get the answers. The answers are there. You just, all you have to do is look a little bit and you can find them in the Catholic Church. So we're so blessed to have that, because then it's not like well, who knows, who knows about these things, or what might be true. It's like, no, we know it's true. I mean, and we can back it up with any number of arguments that to figure out what's going on and what the church teaches. That's just, I just feel bad for people who don't have that. I mean, who don't realize that's there, because it's wonderful.
And I think another thing that a lot of people miss a little bit is that you can't, kind of what you said, you can't decide to have these conversations in 10th grade. That is good. I'm glad you're having them now, but there has to be an experience of this slowly developed over time at an appropriate age level, coming up from when they're little kids. I mean, I just had this conversation with my 4.5-year-old daughter just at Mass yesterday. And we, as many parents of 4-year-olds experience, are having like some Mass time behavioral struggles. And we listened to the Imelda Glory Story recently for the first time. And, my daughter listened to that and she was like, well, I want to receive my first communion. And I was like, well, your mass behavior didn't make me realize that. I didn't realize you would like to do that. If you would, we're going to have to improve a bit, and you can still be at mass. And every time you go to mass, it's a miracle. I'm not teaching her the term transubstantiation, but I am saying like, that's God. And when the bells ring, we are respectful and we are quiet and we're not like snaking under the pew, because Jesus is here and this is what's really happening. And you can do that when they're 4, and you should do that when they're 4, because, they have to understand how serious this is. And then they do need to understand what the term transubstantiation means a couple years after that. And then you do get to present them with all the Eucharistic miracles, perhaps like a year after that. And then when they're older, they can read all of I mean, there's a stage of it. But if the first time you've ever said to them, when they say, well, I don't want to go to mass, and you say, well, we go to receive Jesus, and they're like, what are you talking about? That's not the time. And I don't think homeschool families are doing that. I think part of the reason why a lot of families do choose to homeschool is that because they can instill and pass on the faith in this very intentional way over time, over the years of schooling. But I think it was Pew Research that came out with a research study in 2023, I want to say, where they went to a bunch of 20 to 30, I think it was like 22 to like 35-year-olds who now identify as nothing religiously, who grew up religious. And they went to them and asked, when did you kind of decide you were not this religion, or you no longer believed it? And I think a lot of parents anticipated that age being 18, 19, 20. They anticipated being college, right? And just overwhelmingly, this whole demographic said, oh yeah, like 11, 12, maybe 13. I mean, we're really realizing that the age that people intellectually leave the faith is middle school. It's in middle school. So you need to impress upon them that the Catholic Church is compatible with science. It is intellectual. This is not like a magical man in the sky that we believe in, and we go to this church because it has a great community. I hope it has a great community. That's lovely, but that's not why we go to mass. It's so much younger than I think we think it is. And it's just so important in those early years and in middle school, really, to instill, I think, this love. In the little years, you get to make them love it. You get to see that this is so beautiful. Like, that's where the liturgical living stuff is so fun. And I'm getting to do that now with a 4-year-old. But I know that you need to like capture this love and this intention and this fascination now. And then we need to build on that quickly, because we can't wait till they're 16 to do it. Or, hope that they go to a Catholic college and someone there, like a focused missionary or a priest or a professor, will make them fall in love with it. We need to do that now as parents in those young years, and then build upon that into middle school and high school.
And I know this isn't something, well, we're talking a lot about homeschooling because that's what we do here, but like what you just explained, that's the role of, obviously, every parent needs to be a homeschooler when it comes to the faith, right? And when you're homeschooling, it's just, there's nobody else to do it. You're not assuming it's the Catholic teacher, the theology teacher over in the Catholic school who's doing it. It's not the faith formation program at the parish. It's like, it's you got to do it. Nobody else. So there's a benefit there in that there's just you can obviously, have people help with different things, but what you just explained is that's parenting. That's what you have to do that's a role as parents. So that's important.
Yeah, 100%. I think, what is the Charlotte Mason phrase? Education is an atmosphere, a discipline, and a life. Like, that's education.
Steve and I were talking before we got together with you today. I know that he saw you guys at conferences over the summer, or at least one conference, right? So we were hoping to hear about what's happening at Holy Heroes now, what you're looking forward to.
Yes, we were back at conferences this summer. I had a baby in the late spring, so I did not make it. But my parents were speaking. Did you see them at the Minnesota?
I did. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. The Minnesota Home Educators Conference, I believe, in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And they had a great time. now that my last sibling has graduated from high school, she graduated in May, I think you're going to see my parents at a lot more conferences. I hope to go to one or two. I do have a sister getting married in the summer, so that always throws a little bit of a wrench into the plans because you have to, be in North Carolina for the wedding.
Hmm.
But I hope we will be at some more conferences this summer. And we have another Glory Story under production right now. St. Pier Giorgio Frassati will hopefully be here in time for Easter baskets in the spring. So we're really excited for that. And, we have a few other projects that I don't think they've been announced. So I don't think I can say anything right now. But there'll be some fun stuff coming up throughout 2026.
Our family was big in the glory stories too, just like I think everybody else that I know. But you also have this. Well, for one, you were super well represented at the conference. Like your setup was like the star of the conference, in my opinion. But you also have these new books about like the faith throughout the world, or
Very Young Catholic. Those are awesome. I love the Very Young Catholic Project. We just released the 8th book in the series, Very Young Catholics in Mexico, in time for Our Lady of Guadalupe's feast. So the Very Young Catholic Project is a project that came to us a couple years ago. And Emily had decided that she wanted to write a book about very young Catholics in every time zone in the world, so all 24 time zones, because she wanted to provide a visual representation of the part of the Mass where we hear it say, from the rising of the sun to the setting, a perfect offering is being made. So she really wanted to show that there is literally a Mass being said throughout the rising of the sun to the setting. And she targets these books at those kind of pivotal ages that we had talked about, those 10, 11, 12, 13. And so what she does, it's a really cool concept. She picks a country in each time zone and she connects with a family there through various means. And she travels to the country. She brings a professional photographer with her, and they get to visit with this family and learn what it's like to be a young Catholic in that country. So let me see if I can remember. I probably am not going to remember all 18, but we have India, Ireland, Iceland, the US, Mexico, Argentina, Brazil, Austria, Thailand, Taiwan, Dubai, New Zealand. I've forgotten some now, but as you can see, literally all around the world. So the series is not yet done. We only have 18 of 24. The Philippines is coming soon, and a couple other fun ones that I don't think I can say yet. But this is a really awesome way for kids to see what it's like to be Catholic everywhere in the world. And their family's always going to Mass. And through these books, she's trying to cover every aspect of the Apostles' Creed. So there's also, it's not just a story where you're getting to see photos and hear about these things. You're also learning theological concepts at an age-appropriate way in these years. And you will touch on, once you've read the whole series, you will touch on every aspect of the Apostles' Creed. You will have experienced every single sacrament, including marriage, including holy orders somewhere in the world. There are already multiple First Communions, which is fun. The other thing is it spans the entire liturgical year. So Mexico, like I said before, it's Our Lady of Guadalupe, and Advent. In Brazil, it's Holy Week. I believe it's Dubai is Pentecost. There's a lot of ordinary time, as there always is. But it is just such a tangible way to show your kids that A, this is real, B, people are doing this, and C, it doesn't matter where you live in the world, you can go to Mass, and here's what that looks like. And these are not small books. I mean, I think the shortest one is 78 pages. Mexico is 110. I mean, these are big books, and they have been integrated in a lot of homeschool curriculums. I know we've been poking people at Kolbe, talking about how that these need to be incorporated into the Kolbe curriculum, because every page has photos on it. They're really kind of fun, gentle ways that you share Catholic culture in your home. This isn't a theology textbook. These are just stories. And isn't that so great that they go to Mass and they're passionate about their faith?
Sounds very relatable.
Yeah, and there's a fun, unique things like horseback racing in Ireland and all the animals that they have in New Zealand that we don't have. Um, but then there's also the shared experience of being a very young Catholic, just like in your own home.
That sounds great. When you visit family that you haven't seen in a long time and like, oh, I remember when you were this big and that kind of, do you get that on like orders of magnitude, people who have grown up listening to your recordings and then they encounter you somewhere and
Yeah, it happened to my brother in boot camp.
oh, no.
An older it was a female officer, like walked up to him and was like, "Are you Trey from Holy Heroes?" And he was like, "Yes, ma'am." And she was like, "Oh, yeah." And it was just fun. And all of the guys he was with were like, "Oh, what? How does she know you? Who
Yeah.
are you?" So it does happen. It's fun. I had a lot of calls. We did a lot of work with Hurricane Helene when it hit North Carolina. We did a lot of relief efforts, and we had some really generous folks. And I called a list of, the dozens and dozens of people who had been extremely generous. And it was funny, some of the phone call answering, they were like, "Excuse me for a second, I need to get my children." And I was like, "Okay, that's fine." Like, I'm more than happy to talk to them. But it is fun, and it's good accountability. It's good to not be anonymous in a lot of settings. Um,
That's
you
an
know,
interesting point. Yeah, that's well said.
yeah. I remember it happened to me a few times at the parish I went to during college. And I was like, noted that, yeah, there are people who now know I'm here, so I better be here. And I was, for more reasons than that, but
Yes.
it is
Yep.
helpful.
Sure. Well, what would you have to say to current Kolbe students or their parents who are working with them through their Kolbe years? What advice would you have for them?
Hmm. I said that earlier, that you are going to get to and should read these books you're reading again in your life. And I think that's really true. But there is a really special period of time in your education where you just get to read this, and this is your kind of quote unquote job. And don't take it for granted. And even if you don't get anything out of these books, or you feel like you don't get anything out of these books right now, you will, and you don't realize what you've taken from it. And, you know, maybe this is just me getting older, but I was like, man, it was just my job to read books and talk and think about them and write papers. What a life that was.
It doesn't seem like that when you're when
Yeah, when you're in it.
you're in it, but yeah, it's definitely the case. Like, oh, you just get to read these things, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Both my wife and I read a lot of, well, she probably read them when she was homeschooled. I didn't read them until I was in college, but now it's really fun in our house as our kids are going up and reading these things, like the exciting dinner conversations that we're able to have, which I think changes things. So the parents can pick up some of those things too, and be excited about it. I mean, not if it's a drudgery, but boy, when we start talking about the Iliad, we get some really fun, heated conversations going on around the dinner table. So yeah, it makes me think of, well, it was tying into your earlier conversations about like your daughter watching, seeing things from when you were experiencing it. So it's interesting as a parent to kind of experience these things through your children seeing them for the first time as well, and kind of seeing what they pick up on, and the wonder that they have. But
Yeah, and I will just one thing I will say for parents is, if you didn't get a chance to read these, or even if you did honestly read these in high school or college, these being the books that we've been throwing around that are covered in the Kolbe curriculum, I will just kind of challenge that you also need to read these, when your kids are reading them, or maybe pre-read them over the summer. Um, because if we really want kids to fall in love with this and really want to be lifelong learners in this vein, they have to see that modeled for them, and they have to see that you're doing that. And it is busy with kids and a lot going on, but I would really challenge, and I challenge myself, because I really realized this a few years ago, and I realized my daughter was like noting what I was spending my time doing. that we need to read these things. We need to be engaged in this. We need to be able to talk about this with our kids, or just have our kids be aware that we are thinking and talking about this with our spouses, with our, friends. The conversations we have need to demonstrate that we are continuing this lifelong learning, because, everybody wants to save Western civilization, but nobody wants to read Dante. I think that is, a really wake up call for parents is, we need to be doing this too. This is not just something, if we want our children to fall in love with this and continue it through the rest of their lives, we need to show them what that looks like.
Well said. That's very encouraging and inspiring. We're going to have a lot of links in our show notes, of course, to the Holy Heroes website. Are there other resources you would recommend to us, or other things for us to include in our notes?
Well, I think Glory Stories and the Very Young Catholic Project are great. I think families are going to love them. And I can also make sure that you have the link to all the free programs we offer, including a weekly Sunday Mass prep that I know I didn't claim to have a great behaved 4-year-old in church, but I like to think it could be worse if we weren't, doing this Sunday Mass prep beforehand to try to prepare her for Mass. And, we usually get through the liturgy of the Word.
Yep. That'd be great. Okay. And we'll also include a link to the episode I mentioned earlier with Clara's parents, number 63, The Saints Speak for Themselves. What a real joy this has been to spend this time visiting with you, Clara. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you.
Subscribe to the Kolbecast on your favorite podcast app so that you don't miss an episode. And let us know how we're doing by leaving a rating or a review. And as always, feel free to email us at podcast@kolbe.org.
Mary, our Mother, pray for us. St. Maximilian Kolbe, St. Ignatius of Loyola, holy saints and angels, pray for us. Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam.